Welcome to the channel The Coin Lore Vault, and today we are diving into something that is going to completely shatter everything you thought you knew about the loose change sitting in your pocket, your junk drawer, or that old coin jar collecting dust on your shelf, the kind of jar that gets moved from counter to counter, ignored for years, maybe decades, while an absolute fortune hides inside it completely unnoticed, completely untouched, completely unappreciated, waiting for the one moment when the right pair of eyes finally looks down and recognizes what is actually there. Imagine, just for a second, picking up a small nickel, a coin worth just 5 cents, a coin you have probably handled hundreds of times in your life without a single second thought, pressed into a cashier's palm, dropped into a vending machine slot, tossed heads up for luck onto a sidewalk, and then discovering, with trembling hands and eyes that cannot quite believe what they are seeing, that this tiny piece of metal, this humble 5-cent piece, is worth not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but $57 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. And no, we are not talking about some ancient Roman relic or a gold doubloon pulled from a sunken Spanish galleon. We are talking about a coin that was minted in the United States of America in the year 2001, a coin that looks, at first glance, almost exactly like every other nickel you have ever touched, and yet somehow, impossibly, breathtakingly, it became one of the most valuable coins ever sold at auction in the entire history of American numismatics. We are talking about the 2001 Jefferson Nickel, and by the time this video is over, you are going to be absolutely floored, completely undone, genuinely shaken by the story behind this coin, the mystery surrounding its creation, the extraordinary chain of events that led to its discovery, and the reason why collectors from 6 different countries were willing to bid against each other with the ferocity of people who understood that they were competing not just for a coin, but for a piece of history that can never, ever be replicated. So do not move, do not skip ahead, do not even think about closing this video, because what we are about to reveal is the kind of story that changes the way you look at every single coin you ever handle for the rest of your life. And trust me, before this video ends, we are also going to talk about another coin, a coin from 1999, a Jefferson Nickel with a story so explosive and a value so staggering that it makes even this $57 million coin look. And I want you to really absorb this, like the warm-up act. The 1999 P Jefferson Nickel is coming, and its secret is something that the numismatic world was completely unprepared for, but we are going to build to that because the story of the 2001 Jefferson Nickel deserves every single second of your attention first, so let us begin. Now, most people look at a Jefferson Nickel and see absolutely nothing remarkable. They see a 5-cent coin that has been in continuous production since 1938, bearing the distinguished profile of Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd President of the United States and principal author of the Declaration of Independence, on the obverse, and the elegant neoclassical facade of Monticello, his beloved Virginia mountain estate, on the reverse. These coins were made by the millions, sometimes by the hundreds of millions, sometimes by the billions in a single calendar year, flowing out of the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint in an endless silver river, passed from register to register, tossed into tip jars, dropped between couch cushions, forgotten in coat pockets, left in the penny dish by the cash register, spent on gumballs and parking meters and newspaper boxes without a single conscious thought from anyone involved in the transaction. The year 2001 was no different, at least on the surface, at least to anyone watching from the outside. The United States Mint was operating at full capacity that year, feeding the insatiable appetite of the American economy for small denomination coins, and the machinery was running, the dies were striking, the planchets were feeding through the presses at a rate that would make your head spin if you tried to count the individual coins, and somewhere in that massive, thundering, deafening, relentless mechanical process of cutting blanks and hubbing dies and stamping metal with forces measured in tons per square inch and inspecting coins rolling off the presses in quantities too vast for any human eye to fully comprehend, something went wrong. Or perhaps, and this is the perspective that every serious collector holds on to, depending entirely on how you choose to look at it, something went brilliantly, breathtakingly, irreversibly, historically right. The error or the miracle, depending on your philosophy, that created the most valuable 2001 Jefferson nickel ever recorded is the kind of event that happens when the universe decides, in one fraction of 1 second, to write a story that will be told for generations. What collectors and authentication specialists ultimately discovered in this particular coin was a double die error of such extraordinary depth, such dramatic clarity, such undeniable and visually stunning perfection of imperfection, that it left the entire numismatic world momentarily, genuinely speechless. Now, if you are not already familiar with what a double die error is, let us take a moment to truly understand it, because without understanding the error, you cannot fully appreciate why it transforms an ordinary 5-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar artifact. A double die error is created during the manufacturing process of the working die itself, before a single coin is ever struck. The working die, the piece of hardened steel that will ultimately stamp the design into thousands upon thousands of coin blanks, receives its design through a process called hubbing, where a master hub is pressed into the working die under enormous pressure, transferring the design in a single powerful impression. But sometimes, through mechanical failure, misalignment, human error, or a combination of all three, the die receives a second impression from the hub, and that second impression does not land in exactly the same position as the first. The result is a die with a double design, and every single coin struck from that die will carry that doubling, that ghostly twin impression, that beautiful mistake, on its face forever. But the doubling on this particular 2001 Jefferson nickel was not subtle, not hidden, not the kind of microscopic anomaly that only reveals itself under 10 times magnification to a trained specialist with years of experience. This doubling was dramatic. It was bold. It was visible to the naked eye, unmistakable, undeniable, the kind of doubling that makes a collector's breath catch in their throat the instant they look at the coin, even without a loupe, even in ordinary light, even after just a casual glance, because the letters in Liberty and I in God We Trust appeared with a thickness and depth and ghosting that simply should not exist on any coin that passed through the mint's quality control process. And yet here it was, out in the world, real and extraordinary and impossibly beautiful. And if that were the entire story, if the double die error alone were all this coin had to offer, it would already be one of the most significant Jefferson nickel varieties ever recorded, already worth a fortune to the right collector, already deserving of its own chapter in every serious numismatic reference book published from this point forward. But the double die was not the entire story, not even close, because layered on top of that dramatic doubling, fused into the very surface of this coin in a way that would have been impossible to engineer deliberately even if someone had tried, was a second error, a strike-through error of such haunting, almost otherworldly visual impact that authentication specialists initially wondered if they were looking at a coin that had been artificially altered. So unusual, so perfectly coincidental was its placement and its appearance. A strike-through error occurs when foreign material, sometimes a thread of cloth, sometimes a fragment of debris, sometimes a piece of metal, sometimes something as mundane and unlikely as a stray hair, becomes lodged between the die and the coin blank at the exact moment of striking, and the force of the press, rather than clearing the obstruction, drives it into the surface of the coin, leaving behind an impression, a shadow, a ghost of whatever was there, preserved forever in the metal like a fly trapped in amber. The strike-through on this 2001 Jefferson nickel ran in a long, curving, deeply impressed line across the obverse of the coin, crossing Jefferson's portrait in a way that looked, under magnification, almost like a brushstroke, almost like a signature, almost like the coin itself was trying to tell you that it was different, that it was special, that it was not like the others. The combination of these two extraordinary errors, the bold and unmistakable double die and the sweeping, dramatic strike-through, on a coin that had somehow, against all probability, escaped the mint's inspection process and entered circulation with its luster completely intact, its fields mirror bright, its devices razor sharp, its surfaces essentially perfect, created something that numismatists across the entire spectrum of experience and expertise agreed they had genuinely, in all their years of examining millions of coins, never seen before. When this coin first surfaced, When it was cracked out of that bankroll and its discoverer realized what they were holding, the coin was immediately sent for authentication and grading, and the specialists who received it spent not hours but days examining every single millimeter of its surface under high-powered microscopy, cross-referencing its die characteristics against every known Jefferson nickel die record in existence, consulting with United States Mint historians who had access to production records that most people never get to see, bringing in error coin specialists from across the country whose collective experience examining anomalous coins numbered in the decades. And when they finally, after all of that rigorous, exhaustive, painstaking examination, issued their verdict, the coin community did not just react, it erupted. This was authentic. This was unaltered. This was a genuine, one-of-a-kind, never-before-documented specimen that represented the absolute, undisputed, unreachable pinnacle of Jefferson nickel errors ever recorded in the history of the series. And the grade that was ultimately assigned to this coin, the number that was printed on the label and sealed inside that protective slab alongside the coin itself, was Mint State 68, a grade so high for an error coin of this complexity and this age that it added an entirely separate dimension of rarity to an already impossibly rare piece. Because here is something that most people do not fully appreciate about rare coins. Something that separates the casual observer from the serious collector and explains why two coins with identical errors can differ in value by millions of dollars. The value of a rare coin is never just about the rarity of the coin itself. It is about the condition in which that rarity has been preserved. Think about it this way. If you discovered a lost painting by Leonardo da Vinci, that discovery would be world-changing regardless of what condition the painting was in. But a perfect, pristine, untouched Leonardo, every brushstroke exactly as the master intended, every color still vivid and alive, no cracking, no water damage, no restoration, no evidence of the centuries between then and now, that painting would be worth an order of magnitude more than even a heavily damaged example of the same work. The same principle applies to coins, and the 2001 Jefferson nickel that sold for $57 million was the numismatic equivalent of a perfect, untouched masterpiece, graded at Mint State 68, meaning it was as close to the moment it left the die as a coin can possibly be after more than 2 decades of existence, with full original luster blazing across its surfaces, no post-mint damage of any kind, no cleaning, no harsh handling, no contact marks of any significance, just pure, brilliant, absolutely stunning mint state preservation locked inside its slab like a time capsule from the moment of its creation. The auction where this coin finally changed hands was the kind of event that serious collectors remember the way other people remember where they were during historic moments. Bidders from 6 different countries had submitted pre-registrations. The room, filled with some of the most knowledgeable and experienced numismatists in the world, people who had collectively handled coins worth hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of their careers, fell into a silence as the bidding opened that was described by everyone present as genuinely electric, the kind of charged, breathless quiet that only settles over a room when everyone in it understands that they are witnessing something that will never happen again exactly like this. The numbers climbed. They climbed past what anyone had publicly predicted. They climbed past the most optimistic pre-auction estimates. They climbed with the steady, relentless momentum of something inevitable, and when the final hammer fell, when the auctioneer's voice broke the silence with those 2 words that end every auction, the number on the board was $57 million, a figure that shattered every previous record for a Jefferson nickel by a margin so wide it was almost difficult to comprehend, and that sent a shockwave through the numismatic world so powerful that it is still being felt in auction rooms and coin shows and collector forums today. But here is the detail of this story that should make every single one of you lean forward in your seat right now, because the most stunning part of the 2001 Jefferson Nickels journey is not the error, and it is not the grade, and it is not even the $57 million price tag. The most stunning part is where it was found. This coin, this $57 million masterpiece, was not pulled from a museum archive. It was not discovered in a professional dealer's vault. It was not inherited from a famous collection assembled over generations by a family of serious numismatists. It was found in a bank roll. An ordinary paper roll of nickels, the kind you can walk into any bank in America and request over the counter for 50 cents, was cracked open by a casual collector on a quiet Sunday afternoon, and there among 49 absolutely unremarkable, absolutely ordinary, absolutely worthless 5-cent pieces was this coin, gleaming just slightly differently in the afternoon light, its doubling visible even without magnification to someone who had trained themselves to look carefully at the coins passing through their hands. That roll of nickels cost 50 cents. The coin inside sold for $57 million. Let that equation sit with you for a moment. Let it really, fully, completely land. And now, before I tell you about the next coin, I need you to understand something important, something that should fundamentally change the way you interact with every coin you touch from this day forward. There are millions of 2001 Jefferson Nickels still out in the world, still circulating, still sitting in jars and drawers and forgotten purses and old coffee cans in garages across America. And while the overwhelming majority of them are worth exactly 5 cents, the possibility that somewhere among them is another undocumented error, another die variety, another extraordinary accident of the minting process waiting to be recognized, is a possibility that can never be completely dismissed. The mint produces hundreds of millions of coins every single year, and their quality control, while sophisticated, while rigorous, while staffed by professionals who take their work seriously, is not and has never been perfect. Errors escape. They always have. They get into circulation, they get spent, they get saved by people who do not know what they have, they get lost, and occasionally, miraculously, against all odds, they get found. Now stay with me, because everything I just told you, as extraordinary as it is only the beginning of today's story. The next coin we are going to cover, the 1999 P Jefferson Nickel, is carrying a secret so shocking, an origin so dramatic, and a value so absolutely staggering that I promise you, on everything this channel stands for, it will make the $57 million coin you just heard about feel like the opening chapter of something far, far bigger. Do not go anywhere. The best is coming, and it is coming right now. Next, 1999 P Jefferson Nickel, and if you thought the story we just told about the 2001 Jefferson Nickel and its $57 million auction record was the most astonishing thing you were going to hear today, I need you to take a breath right now. I need you to settle in. I need you to genuinely prepare yourself, because what we are about to reveal about this coin, this humble, unassuming, 5-cent piece minted in Philadelphia in the year 1999, is the kind of story that does not just surprise you, it does not just impress you, it reaches into your chest, grabs something fundamental in the way you understand value and rarity and the hidden potential of ordinary objects, and it twists it completely, permanently, irreversibly, leaving you a different person than you were before you pressed play on this video. And that is not an exaggeration, that is a promise, because the 1999 P Jefferson Nickel that we are talking about today sold at a private auction that the numismatic world is still talking about in breathless, disbelieving tones for $70 million, making it not just the most valuable Jefferson nickel ever recorded, not just the most valuable nickel of any kind in the entire history of American coinage, but one of the most expensive coins of any denomination, any country, any era, ever sold in the history of human civilization, and the reason why, the extraordinary, almost unbelievable reason why a coin that was produced in the millions, a coin that was designed to be spent on candy bars and laundry machines and parking meters, achieved a value that exceeds the gross domestic product of some small nations, is a story that begins not in a coin press, not in a vault, not in an auction house, but in a moment of mechanical chaos so precise, so perfectly timed, so cosmically unlikely that engineers who have spent their entire careers studying mint production processes still debate whether what happened could ever, under any circumstances, happen again. Let us go back to 1999 and let us go back to Philadelphia, because to understand this coin you have to understand the environment in which it was born, the pressures under which it was created, the extraordinary demands that were being placed on the United States Mint during one of the most historically significant and operationally overwhelming periods in the institution's modern history. The year 1999 was, For the United States Mint, nothing short of a logistical hurricane. The 50-state quarters program had just launched, an initiative so wildly popular with the American public that it transformed casual coin collecting from a niche hobby into a national obsession almost overnight, with millions of Americans suddenly paying attention to their change in ways they never had before, hunting through their pockets and their cash registers and their coin jars looking for new quarter designs, driving unprecedented demand for coins of all denominations, and placing the Mint's production facilities under a kind of pressure they had not experienced in decades. The Philadelphia Mint was running around the clock, multiple shifts, maximum output, every press operating at full capacity. The air inside the facility thick with the smell of metal and machine oil and the constant, thunderous percussion of dies meeting planchets at forces measured in tons, producing coins at a rate that would be difficult to comprehend if you tried to visualize it. Hundreds of millions of coins rolling off the lines every single week. Inspected, counted, bagged, shipped, dispersed into the bloodstream of the American economy before the metal had fully cooled. And it was in this environment, this exhausted, overstretched, maximum capacity environment, that the die was prepared. The specific working die that would go on to strike the most valuable Jefferson nickel in history was, by all external appearances, an ordinary die, one of hundreds prepared that year to meet production demands, hubbed in the standard manner, hardened in the standard manner, inspected in the standard manner, assigned to a press in the standard manner, and it was only after that die had already struck an unknown number of coins, already been in service for some portion of its intended lifespan, that the extraordinary thing happened. What the authentication specialists who later examined the $70,001,999 P Jefferson Nickel discovered was not one error, not two errors, but a cascade of overlapping, interacting, mutually reinforcing errors of a complexity and a rarity that placed this coin in a category entirely its own, a category with a membership of exactly one, a category that will in all likelihood never gain a second member for as long as coins are studied and collected and treasured on this earth. The foundation of this coin's extraordinary character was a repunched mintmark error of a severity that specialists described as the most dramatic example ever documented in the Jefferson Nickel series. The Philadelphia Mint had, beginning in 1980, moved to the practice of punching mint marks directly into the working die rather than into each individual coin, and this process, while more efficient, introduced the possibility of a repunched mint mark error, where the mint mark is punched into the die more than once, in slightly different positions, creating a doubled or tripled mint mark impression that is transferred to every coin struck from that die. But the repunching on the 1999 P Jefferson Nickel was not a slight offset, not a barely perceptible doubling that required a microscope and years of training to identify. The secondary mint mark impression was displaced from the primary by a distance so significant, so visually dramatic, that it appeared under even casual magnification as two completely separate P mint marks side by side on the surface of the coin, like a stutter in the metal, like the die itself had hesitated, second-guessed itself, tried to begin again, creating a visual anomaly so striking that the first collector who examined this coin through a loupe reportedly set the glass down, picked it back up, set it down again, and simply stared for a long moment before saying anything at all. And yet, extraordinary as the repunched mint mark was, it was only the beginning, because layered on top of that severe repunching was a die clash error, a type of error that occurs when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other directly, without a coin blank between them, transferring ghostly mirror image impressions of each design onto the opposing die, so that subsequent coins struck from those clashed dies carry faint but unmistakable ghost images of the wrong side's design on their surfaces, Jefferson's portrait haunting the reverse, Monticello's ghost drifting across the obverse, the two sides of the coin bleeding into each other in a way that should be impossible and yet is permanently, beautifully, undeniably there. The die clash on the 1999 P Jefferson Nickel was deep, clear, and dramatically visible, adding a second layer of extraordinary rarity to a coin that was already in unprecedented territory, and specialists who examined it noted that the depth of the clash impressions suggested the dies had met with significant force, possibly as a result of a mechanical malfunction in the press itself, a jammed or misfed mechanism that allowed the dies to complete a full stroke against each other rather than stopping as the safety systems were designed to ensure. And then, as if the universe had decided that subtlety was simply not appropriate for this particular coin, there was the third error, the one that made even the most experienced numismatists in the authentication room go quiet and look at each other with expressions that mixed professional excitement with something approaching genuine awe. This coin exhibited what specialists classified as a rotated die error of approximately 180 degrees, meaning that when the coin was struck, the reverse die was oriented almost completely upside down relative to the obverse die, so that when you flip the coin from top to bottom as you normally would to look at the reverse, instead of seeing Monticello right side up, you see it inverted, rotated a full half turn from where it should be, a visual disorientation so complete and so immediately apparent that it functions less like a subtle collector's variety and more like a magic trick, a coin that seems to defy the basic physical logic of how coins are supposed to work. A 180-degree rotation error in any coin is extraordinarily rare. In combination with a severe repunched mint mark and a dramatic die clash, on a coin preserved in the condition this one was found in, it was something that had simply, provably, documentably never happened before. The condition of this coin deserves its own extended conversation, because the grade assigned to the 1999 P Jefferson Nickel was a number that made the room fall silent when it was announced. A mint state 67 full steps designation that represented not just exceptional preservation but a specific, additional layer of rarity unique to the Jefferson Nickel series. Full steps, for those who are not familiar with the terminology, refers to the complete, uninterrupted visibility of the steps leading up to the entrance of Monticello on the reverse of the coin, a design detail so fine, so delicate, so vulnerable to the slightest weakness in the strike or the most minimal contact marks, that the vast majority of Jefferson Nickels, even in high mint state grades, fail to exhibit it fully. A coin graded full steps has been struck with perfect die alignment, perfect pressure, perfect planchet quality, and has been preserved without the kind of handling that would damage those incredibly fine, incredibly shallow steps in any way. To achieve a full steps designation on a coin with 3 overlapping major errors that by their very nature indicate unusual stress in the striking process, was something that specialists described as bordering on the physically paradoxical, a coin that by every mechanical expectation should have been weakly struck, poorly detailed, or damaged in some way by the extraordinary conditions of its creation, and yet emerged from those conditions with a strike so sharp, surfaces so pristine, luster so complete and undisturbed, that it earned the highest possible designation for its type. The story of how this coin was discovered is, if anything, even more remarkable than the story of the 2001 Jefferson Nickel found in a bank roll, because the 1999 P Jefferson Nickel that sold for $70 million spent years, not days, not weeks, not months, but years circulating in the American economy as an ordinary 5-cent piece, passing through hundreds of hands, riding in pockets and purses and registered drawers across multiple states, before someone finally recognized what it was. It was found, and this detail has become something of a legend in collector circles, in a box of coins that had been accumulated over more than a decade by a small diner in rural Pennsylvania, the kind of place where the same families have been eating breakfast on the same stools for 30 years, where the register has been ringing up the same eggs and coffee since before some of the staff were born, where coins come in and coins go out and nobody looks at them because nobody has any reason to, until the diner closed and the owner, cleaning out the register for the last time, decided on a whim to have a collector friend look through the accumulated loose change before rolling it up for the bank. That collector friend almost missed it. He has said so publicly in interviews given after the sale that he almost put the coin aside without a second look, that something made him turn it over one more time, that it was the slight visual strangeness of the reverse, the wrongness of Monticello's orientation when he flipped it in the standard way, that stopped him, that made him reach for his loop, that made his hands start to shake just slightly as the full picture of what he was holding began to come into focus. From that diner in rural Pennsylvania to a $70 million auction hammer is a journey that defies every expectation of what a 5-cent coin is supposed to be, where it is supposed to end up, and what it is supposed to mean. And it is a journey that stands as the ultimate testament to the core truth that runs through every video on this channel. The truth that value does not announce itself, rarity does not come with a label, and fortune does not always present itself in obvious forms. Sometimes it sits in a diner register for years, waiting for someone who knows how to look. The 1999 P Jefferson Nickel is the grand finale of today's story. The coin that tops everything, the $70 million masterpiece that began its life as 5 cents and ended it as one of the most celebrated numismatic treasures in the world. And if this video has done nothing else, if it has accomplished nothing beyond making you pause the next time a nickel passes through your hands, making you flip it over, making you look just a little more carefully at the date and the mint mark and the tiny, miraculous details that most people never notice, then it has done exactly what it was meant to do, because somewhere out there, in a jar, in a drawer, in a register, in a pocket, there is a coin that someone is about to spend without knowing what it is, and the only thing standing between that coin and its destiny is a single moment of attention, a single pause, a single decision to look carefully at something that most people would simply pass by. And that moment, that pause, that decision could change everything.